started yet.
Motherfucker!
Try it again.
What it be? What it do? This is Chrissy Poo.
Hola, folks. This is Tristan. We are in episode whatever of the Thick and Thin podcast. I think 14. This is going to be number 14.
14.
Season 2, episode 4. And
Okay, that's where I was at. I'm like, no, we're like on a 4.
Yeah. And today, I got my handy-dandy list because remember what I said at the beginning is we planned everything that we're going to talk about this year, with the exception of the last episode.
So we don't have to do Plan B no more.
No. And today's episode is about relationship failures, which is something you and I are both familiar with.
You are more familiar with.
Yeah.
I've never had a relationship in my life.
You know, I think that, so I was talking with my therapist. And, as we have some episodes coming up and whatnot, I was asking him, about some advice about that certain topic that's going to be in our 2-part finale and what have you. And he had brought up a really good point to me that I think is the lens on which I'm going to think when it comes to our episodes, which is we are technically, when I had created the thing on Spotify and whatnot, I told you to pick a category, chose educational.
We're educating.
Yeah.
In a way.
Yeah. So he really got me thinking of you want your audience to take away something from every episode.
Okay.
So I think if we really think about the lens of relationship failures, we can talk about some good, juicy stuff, but I don't think we want to be like a lot of those people that just purely bitch about their relationship problems. It's just more about, learning from our failures. I think it's a good lesson. So
I like drama, though.
Yeah. I mean, we'll have a mix of both. I mean, that's fine. I mean, so do people. People love the drama. Some of the best metrics that we've had from, episodes and whatnot is from that kind of stuff. So
You stanky whores.
Yeah. So.
All right, then. So I guess the best way you could really start this one is, I guess, your first time that you witnessed, or, that you had like a bad relationship.
First time I've had a bad relationship?
Outside of family. Because I always feel like family is always, you have it and then you repair it somehow throughout time.
Well, I think for me, I'm going to talk about one that I wasn't necessarily directly involved in, but I'll talk about where I first learned an example of a really bad relationship. My best friend growing up, his name is Jeff.
I love Jeff.
Jeff is awesome. Yeah. Oh, sup, Jeff? Well, I'll let you know that I shouted you out in this episode. But anyways, so Jeff's parents, growing up, were the first example of a really destructive relationship that I had seen in my life. And for me, that is kind of a lucky thing because most of the time, someone's first example is their family. And don't get me wrong, especially when it comes to their parents and what have you. Mm-hmm. Don't get me wrong, my parents have had their share of not so good things in their marriage that as their kid know way more about than I should. But I think on the whole, I mean, they'll be married for 43 years in January, so needless to say, I'd say their relationship is an overall positive, especially if you've made it that long. It's nothing to scoff at. And especially when I was a kid, even though they had imperfections, their relationship as a whole, they had some pretty healthy habits. They never really shouted at each other in front of me or my sisters. And it was actually very upsetting the very few times that they ever did because it was not something I was used to. Whereas maybe other kids at that age are a little bit less fortunate and it's just kind of a day in the office for them. But my friend Jeff was not so lucky in that department, and I got to witness a lot of it firsthand. I think one story that I remember was when I was 9 years old, I was spending the night at his house because him and I would have sleepovers a lot and spend a lot of time during the weekends. What does that pedophile look for? We're kids. We were 9 years old. Cut it out. But anyways, we were playing the N64, which, you may be too young to know what that is.
I know what that is. I was poor.
Well, ironically enough, Jeff's family wasn't. They lived in a very nice house.
Yeah, but you're also like 5 years older than me.
Yeah, that's fair.
So the console did get old at the time I got it.
That's fair. I mean, he got a GameCube when that first became a thing, all that stuff. But anyways, we were playing the N64, and his dad was like, you gotta go to bed. It's time to turn it off. And he was being a defiant kid because he wanted to play video games and whatnot. His dad drags him into the bathroom by his shirt and starts beating him. And I was witnessing all of it, and obviously 9-year-old Tristan didn't know what to do at the time, so I just never said anything. And so there would be certain times that throughout that kind of stuff, things got really bad in middle school for us. Well, by us, especially him, mainly. Me just being the best friend, being there to witness it. And Jeff's an only child, too, so he didn't have a sibling to kind of go through this with. And, there was beatings, bruises on his mother. And I can out this man now because, even though he did do better over time, he unfortunately passed away last year. But, they got a divorce. It was really ugly. And pretty much every time he was either with his mother or father after the divorce, they were busy trashing the other parent, which is like the number one thing you don't want to do in a divorce is trash the other parent to your kid, because that creates a whole lot of issues. So yeah, that was the toxic relationship that I really learned personally, I think, some bad habits from originally that carried into some other relationships where, I had learned some other bad habits from, and then eventually I had to look at myself hard in the mirror. And we'll get into those in a bit, but do you have an example of that? Of like what you're...
Depends. Is it a girl or a friend? Because I had two of those.
What would you say, like, as little kid Chris, was the relationship that, whether it involved yourself or not, you grew up kind of learning some...
Well, with me, I knew how to separate myself from other people.
Okay.
So if I had a friend that was going through something, I knew how to separate that and not really get emotionally involved in that.
Mm-hmm.
So if I had a friend that was just going through something, I'll just be that one dude that'll just distract them.
Yeah.
So I never really had that issue with friends.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that, like, I was emotionally involved in his parents' relationship. I think it was rough for me to watch how much he was going through stuff. That was rough.
Where I grew up, that's like a normal thing.
Right.
Kids getting beaten right in front of me.
Right.
So, to me, it was a little different. The trashing thing as well, it's kind of... I grew up, everybody did it. So again, it's also very normal to me. See the difference when a couple blocks make... Oh no, you grew up somewhere else.
Grew up in Roxborough Park.
Yeah, you grew up somewhere bougie.
A little bit, yeah.
I grew up in the hood.
Yeah.
Very different. But I think for me, as a kid, no, not really, because even as a child, when I ended up moving to California, I had a very strict dad. Had to be home at a certain time. Had to do my homework. Didn't really get my stuff. I think once I got back to Colorado, I started hanging out with the wrong crew. Doing a lot of stupid things, fighting people for no reason, getting in trouble. But I knew maybe after a couple of months that I had to separate myself from that, because I knew I would probably go to jail if I do something stupid. And just the whole mindset of disappointing my parents I didn't want to do that. I wouldn't get hit, but, well, No, I wouldn't get hit, but I just didn't like disappointing my parents. So I knew how to separate that too. It was once I got into high school where it was a little different.
What would you say is the key, as the cool kids refer to it, as a toxic trait? What would you say is the biggest toxic trait that you grew up learning that affected relationships in a negative way?
Being a yes man.
Hmm.
Uh, you know, I didn't really witness it that much because I was always considered. In high school, I'd be considered the hipster just because I didn't like doing a lot of things that people do. But I had a friend that also had a friend that we were just friends with. He was a yes man all the time. Oh, let's go smoke weed. Oh, let's go do it. Let's go drink. Oh, let's go do it. Let's go do this. Oh, let's go do it. With me, I did some of them, but then if I knew, it was probably going to lead for me doing something stupid, I just would say no. So I think the biggest one would be a yes man, just because a yes man does motivate you to keep doing the same thing over and over again.
Yeah.
And sometimes you don't know it's toxic until it's too late.
Yeah. Yeah, I've known plenty of people that are that way, and I could call them out here, but I'm not going to do that. um, but
What about you?
mine was, we were talking about this actually, what, a couple of episodes ago. I really developed a victim complex for a while. So, not really related to the last story I was talking about, but growing up, I got bullied a lot and what have you. So, I always thought that people were out to get me, they were against me. And it caused me to develop that complex. It would carry in a big way in certain relationships when I would try to get a job, and I struggled with that for a while because I always thought like people just hated me and it was their fault and whatnot. And so, yeah, I think my relationships in general improved a lot once I realized that one. And people don't like being around that all the time, especially people that, unless if they're also
Yep.
big, what's that whole phrase? The whole birds of a feather flock together, something like that. Something
Never
like
heard
that. It's of that vein where it's like the law of attraction.
Okay.
Where you attract what you are. So a lot of the people in my life, maybe some of them had that too, but I think others, that didn't have that so much, especially at the times where those things were the worst, didn't really, spend that much time with me. I mean, I think I probably destroyed a lot of potential friendships and even a couple of romantic relationships with that mentality.
What would you say, outside of Jeff, I guess a friend that was toxic, and what did you do to kind of separate yourself from that?
Well, Jeff, I wouldn't say
He wasn't toxic, but
he was no
the situation.
Yeah, it's toxic. A friend that was toxic. Ooh, that's a good question. Points. I'm gonna save that for our season finale, so I won't talk about that one right now.
Oh damn!
Yeah. I think that's a good question. I think a lot of the people that I was in a fraternity with in college. Now, don't get me wrong, I still have a few of those friends. I've got three, at least two, but hopefully three such guys coming to the wedding. So that'll be a lot of fun. And I still have good friendships with those people. But there were a couple of guys that were in that group. And I never, because of that mentality, and whenever somebody would I felt like somebody did me wrong, I would get in their face about it, and people don't tend to like that very much. I was never the popular guy in my fraternity. To this day, I don't even know why. Well, I know exactly why they wanted me around. They had trouble with recruiting and numbers and all that stuff, so they needed the numbers. But I think if um, it were up to them, I don't think that they would have ever brought me in the first place. But I think that one such case was there was a guy where he was the treasurer of our fraternity, so pretty much in charge of keeping track of the money and all that stuff. Now, with the field that I'm in and whatnot, I thought I would be a good natural successor for that position. And so this guy would train me up all semester. And I'm going to actually lump in one other guy with this too. He was the guy that was the president at the time as well. And, these two guys and a guy that I'm still friends with and I were all like in our own mini clique within the fraternity. And so, along with a couple other guys, but this, I was running against a new guy, and pretty much everybody that whole semester was telling me, like, yeah, we think that given, the skills that you bring, that you ought to be a shoo-in. What I didn't know at the time was that when it comes to groups like that, or any club organization, not just a fraternity, but if you're in any sort of group, there's a certain amount of politics involved, and popularity matters in those groups. That was not something that registered in my brain. I ended up losing by one vote, and I had discovered later that one of the big reasons were two of the guys that said that they were my friends not only didn't vote for me, but convinced other people not to vote for me for that position. It was a position that I thought would really help advance my prospects in terms of like resume building for when I'd have a career and what have you. So, I definitely felt that, that betrayal type of thing. And yeah, I played victim mentality full blown on that one. And I even did for years afterwards too, where a lot of my interactions, I actually went to one of the guys that's coming to my wedding this year. I was actually had his wedding last year. He was the guy that originally got me in that group in the first place. I knew that there would be guys from there. I didn't know how many like fraternity guys that he was going to invite, but I was very, very closed off even up till last year because, all these guys were telling me at the end, by the time I was there long enough, is that I talked too much. And I just knew that they didn't like me very much. And I'm not saying that for everybody, but a good chunk of these people. And given how I acted, I can't really say to blame them. But, it was kind of like that line that I said in the episode last week. Truthful enemy is better than a lying friend. So, anyways, the guy that was treasurer, aka one of the guys that went behind my back with this, he had graduated immediately after. And so I think it was about 6 months later, he had invited me to a wedding, and me being the petty person I was, just ghosted him. Like, I did not. Actually, the next time I saw that guy was at another fraternity member's
Would you
wedding.
say that, I guess, the toxic trait is manipulation?
Yeah, in that case, it was manipulation, but also like a loyalty aspect too, and not even just the fact that if you didn't feel like I was the best candidate, fine, but don't go behind my back with that stuff. Like people that have gone behind my back, whether it be those types of things or people that have cheated on me, very quick way to bring out ugly Tristan is to go behind my back with something, because I'd rather just have you, even if I don't exactly react the best in that moment. The difference between somebody giving, and this is how I know the difference between somebody who's just giving me a tough talk of something that I need to hear versus somebody who is doing something to wrong me, maybe for their benefit, maybe not, I don't know. I'll feel the anger in the moment either way, but then the further time I get removed from it, I'll ask myself, like, okay, maybe they were right about this one. Or does that not even pop into my head? Because chances are, if I still felt like they wronged me years later, chances are they probably wronged me.
Okay.
Whereas usually somebody's just like, yeah, you need to do this or whatnot. But I think in that kind of case, I think if somebody had just been like, frankly, we want this guy. Would have I still been pissed at the time? Probably. Because I didn't have the maturity to handle that kind of thing. But would have I respected it more down the road? Absolutely. And I think outside of the one interaction I had with that treasurer at another guy's wedding, I don't think I did talk to him about the whole, thing that we did, and he gave me a hard time about that. But outside of those two interactions, never interacted with that guy again. And I actually thought that the president at the time was even more cowardly because he apologized to me when he was drunk. And for some reason, a drunken apology just seems pitiful to me. I'm like, how about you be going back into the last week's episode, be a real man and own up. And I just never respected that guy after that. So I think at that point, like, I was like, I'm going to finish out the rest of my time with this because I'm committed, but I ain't talking to these people again that I thought were my friends.
Solid.
Yeah. How about you?
I think it'd be more like weak-minded people. I think it could be a very toxic trait, and I think I talked a little bit about this guy back in episode 8.
I can't even remember what episode 8 is right now.
I think that's the cocaine one.
Oh, I think that's 9.
Okay, episode 9.
Yeah. 8 was the shrooms one.
8 was okay.
Yeah.
Oh, same crap. Drugs. Drugs. But like he's the reason why I got like I'm shaped to be a better person.
Mm-hmm.
But for him, it was when we moved out together, we were doing good. Like we're being trying to be entrepreneurs and everything. And then we invite another guy, and then he kind of adapts to him, which is an alcoholic pothead. So he starts adapting to that guy. I didn't. I was just like, I got better things to do than just smoke weed and get drunk all day.
Right.
And as time passes by, I realized that I had to leave. Mm-hmm. Just because I'm like, I'm not going to... I love him to death, but I just can't socialize with that. Because it's just going to be bringing me down. A couple years passed by. And when I met him, he was like, obviously probably drugged out already. And for me, it's... I think it's toxic if somebody's just, again, back to what I was saying, like a yes man. He kind of was like a yes man too, because he just kept trying to adapt to whatever he was around, mm-hmm. rather than making everything around him adapt to him. And for me, I mean, I was probably a victim of that, especially, we'll talk about it in the finale, but I was adapted to something that I wasn't.
Yeah.
And I think for me, that's the biggest one. You just can't be, such a yes man and adapt to whatever's around you, because that's going to really stop you from growing, and you stop it from growing, and stop you from helping others grow. That's really my big one.
Yeah. As usual, you explained yours a lot more concisely than I did.
I could deal with disloyal people and...
See, I can't do that.
And untrustworthy people. Because I know how to filter, like, certain people to certain things.
Yeah.
But for me, I just can't be around yes men all the time.
Well, yeah. Ooh, that's a good one.
Because I need someone like you. You'll challenge my thinking. I'll talk to you about girls, and you're like, well, remember what you said. If I had a yes man, he'd be like, do it.
Yeah. I don't know, man. It's It's kind of interesting because when it comes to the, yeah, disloyal people, not so much. I think when it comes to dishonest people, I I think I can deal with them by knowing what information to, you know, bring to people. Like the way that I view relationships of all sorts in my life is that everybody, pretty much everybody that's in my life, I have a pretty good gauge on like what information can I trust them with and what information can I not. There's not very many people in which I can trust all of my information entirely. I think in my head I can think of three, which is you, Antonia, and my dad. And that's it.
This shit, I think I only have like one. You. Now that I think about it, I'm like, well, I don't have an Antonio.
Not yet. Not yet.
Not yet. Well, yeah. No, okay. What about, speaking of Antonio, what about relationships? What's like one of the biggest toxic things that you went through in a relationship? Whether it's, no, it has to be that person. It can't be you.
Well, I will say that I think that with the way that with Antonia and I, our wedding is a little bit more than a month out at this point. And we've got a wonderful, wonderful relationship. And a lot of my part in that I can owe to all the lessons that I've learned from failed relationships. And a lot of that being on my end of things too, because I think that it's important for people to know that when we talk about failed relationships, I think it's very important. If you as a member who are listening to this are thinking about this, that examine your relationship failures on your end. Because when it comes to the other people that wrong you, like you can be mad at it all day, but it's not gonna help you other than to identify what type of person they are,
Yeah.
to you. You know, whether I mean even both of the ones romantic relationships that ended on people cheating on me, whether if it's those, you know, people that were in my fraternity that said they were my friend but really weren't, people that were in our circles that said that they were my friend and really aren't. You know, all that stuff. Relationships have two parts, and
Yeah.
you got to examine your end of things. And so for me, it's all about adjusting off of that and learning things. And so a lot of the success that I feel like Antonia and I have in our relationship is we've had some very important conversations very early on. And this is purely from, my end of things, and I'm sure she could speak about her end of things, but um for me it was that making sure that there was certain things where she knew where I stood on things, and knowing that all of the traits that I'd had before that had led to failure, I can't do those if I want to have a successful relationship. So for example, the victim mentality complex that I had a lot was from two relationships that I was cheated on in. So it was like a lot of the time when somebody's cheated on, you'll hear people talk about it and they'll be like, oh, poor me, this person was disloyal and whatnot. And don't get me wrong, like, yeah, they were. And you don't deserve that. But at the end of the day, if you're going to sit there and wallow and feel sorry for yourself, that's not going to help you pave a path towards a successful relationship. You have to understand that in some degree you chose that person. And so you got to figure out what led them to that point. It's very important to examine these things because when you get to your next romantic relationship and what have you, you really got to look out for those things. And this was something that I had to figure out for a while with Antonia and her. We even talked in therapy about it because it was one of my big concerns from my past trauma and whatnot. And, my therapist who's used Myers-Briggs and whatnot had pretty much determined, and based on her history and whatnot, had shown that she doesn't have a history of cheating. Her family doesn't, like, the women in her family are very loyal. They've mostly chosen shitty men, but that's another topic for another day. But, I mean, that kind of goes in, well, actually, no, it's a topic for now, too, because that's kind of the other thing. It's like, you got to know what led them to that point, so that way you can look out for these behaviors in the future. And so, learning all that, I think, and being around some good people, I think it became very easy after that. I think the keys to successful relationships are as such. Do they add value to you, or do you not? Or do they not? Do you add value to them, or do you not? That's it.
Okay.
Yeah. Like to me, the only time I am willing to be in a relationship with people nowadays is if we add mutual value to each other. They could add value to me, but if I have nothing to add to them, I don't want to waste their time and take advantage of them like that.
I think for me on my end, I really don't blame anything on the other person why it failed. Because I've heard a saying where it's people are different, but the people you choose are not. And unfortunately, all my relationship have ended with all of them cheating on me.
Right.
So I still got to sit back and think, be like, okay, what's the common thing that I always keep falling for?
What have you found?
Daddy issues.
That's
the biggest one. That's the biggest one.
Yeah.
And I think the reason why is because, again, they never got, I could be wrong, but they never got actual loving from like a father figure or a male in their life. But I think that's the biggest one. It's not really on them. It's really on me.
Mm-hmm.
Why a lot of relationships fail. Again, I didn't see the same common thing that's happening. And stopping certain things that bother me.
Yeah.
Before it gets too late.
Yeah.
Even now, I mean, I ain't doing none of that. I'm just calling it out as is.
Yeah. That's actually another thing that I learned too, is being willing to have the tough conversations.
I was like, I'd rather pull that Band-Aid off now than doing it like 3 years later. Be like, hey, you know what bothers me? The way you sleep.
What's funny is that's a differentiator romantic wise with Antonia versus all my previous romantic interactions.
Yeah.
I would usually like bottle up my issues and not let it out until it was too late. And even now I still have to work on that a little bit, especially when it comes to smaller stuff. But when it comes to big stuff, like I have to call that stuff out, and it'll be at times that are not convenient sometimes. And for her, it's very much that way. But is my phone ringing?
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see who we got. Oh.
Lifey for Lifey?
Nah, my buddy over in Qatar. But I'll call back. Oh, it's vibrating.
I mean,
but what was I saying? Yeah, no, I think that's important too. Is like a lot of people are afraid to do that. They just like to sweep things under the rug. I find that that's most people. Like most people are just fine trying to sweep things under the rug, but the problem is you can't sweep things under there forever. The junk gets piled up so big you can't hide from it anymore.
I was like that too, just because I liked avoiding, those tough talks.
Mm-hmm.
I always swept everything under the rug. I never really liked speaking up, just because I was uncomfortable. Again, it's not something I'm so used to doing.
Right.
Especially because before I was out from dating for like 7 years, and then just randomly jumping into a relationship, not really knowing anything in relationships.
Right.
And I'm glad that I went through that experience, because it does. A relationship should teach you how to be a better person.
Yeah.
Where it doesn't matter if it's a friendship or an actual romantic relationship, you should always learn off of each person that you encounter.
Yeah.
And I don't think many people do. I think many people are just like, oh, F this person, they done me wrong. Bye.
Yeah.
With me now, it's just like, okay, I'll probably still say F that person, but now it's just more like, okay, what did I learn from this relationship?
Yeah.
What's the good and what's the bad, and what can I carry on to the next one?
Yeah. No, I think that's really what it's all about. I mean, learn, don't, you know, dwell on things too long, especially if it's a failed relationship. The good news is our world population has got about 8 billion people. You got a lot of opportunities to forge good relationships with people.
Yeah, you only need like 2.
Yeah. Yeah, as far as like the special ones, yeah, you don't need much.
Well, you need 2 solid ones. Of course, it's your actual significant other, and then that one person.
Yeah.
Outside of that, everything's just more of an add-on.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's I will say like for someone who just talked about how he had friends that were not really friends. I actually do have quite a few friends that are like good people that I've been around in their lives a very long time. And I find myself very lucky for that. And those experiences that we've shared together are definitely memories that last a lifetime, good and bad. I mean, I was telling a buddy of mine so um, one of my best friends had ended his life about 5 years ago at this point, and his brother, him and I hung out a lot growing up, and I'm still really good friends with this guy. I've known them for I want to say about 17, 18 years at this point, and um, a lot of the stuff that him and I have been through together in terms of like what it's like losing a sibling and all that stuff. Even though him and I aren't quite as close as we used to be, those experiences matter. So appreciate whether if those people are in your life or not anymore, even if the relationship tanked for one reason or another. You had experiences with those people that you can look back on and cherish for what they are. And you take that and move forward. But you got anything else to add before we
Yeah, I guess I think what you could take away from here is you should not dwell on the pain from a failed relationship. Rather seek the positives in it, because in all relationships, there's a reason why you kept them along. It was mostly all positive. It just happened to end in one negative way. Learn from all the positives and, you know, fix yourself as well. But learn from the positives and adapt that stuff to the next person.
Okay. No, that's good. I've got one more really spicy thing before we dip off, actually. I hear a lot of people say I hear this quote all the time, and it's really sad to me. I've heard it in my own family, I've heard it in Antonia's family, I've heard it everywhere. I hate people. Quote, I hate people. I'm going to be real with you guys. If you have ever uttered that quote, I hate people, you don't hate people. You kind of hate yourself.
Yeah.
People have done you wrong, no doubt. There are, you can try building new relationships with people, and people will still do you wrong. That's life. People are very imperfect creatures, and you are also an imperfect creature. For as much wrong as other people have done to you, you've probably done to people. I could think of many, many times I have done people wrong in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And I try to make amends for those the best I can, but some of those people don't talk to me anymore, and it's understandable. But if you utter that quote all the time, you don't hate people. You've just allowed yourself to not learn from failed relationships. And that's punishing only yourself.
Solid.
Solid.
Well, this is the end of episode
14.
14.
Or 4 of season 2. whichever one
Yes.
you prefer to.
Season 2, episode 4.
Yeah.
Let us know what you think, and bye.
Yeah, bye.
Oh, you whore.